So let's start the journey on the ecology. Last week, you remember we discussed about the some basics, why we should learn ecology and how we are going to learn. Right? Different methods of learning, teaching. There we discuss about that we need to have some field sessions, one or two practical classes, as well as we will have a lot of online classes at the same time. Whenever possible, we will meet, we'll have in-class sessions as well. But as I mentioned last week, this subject ecology going to be a very interesting topic for everybody, especially for a biologist. I think I gave some introduction last week. I don't want to go back. And there, finally, I showed some video just to give some definitions on the ecology. I don't want to repeat everything again, but what is ecology? Right? In very simple terms, ecology is the scientific study of the relationships or the interactions. Right? So it's very simple, the scientific study of the interactions. That interaction will be within organisms or within animals or plants or within organisms, as well as the organisms versus the environment, right? So that's all about the ecology, right? The interaction between the individuals or the organisms and the environment. It's very simple, right? The term is very simple, but and knowing interactions going to be a really hard job, because we don't know what kind of relationships that animal have one another and with them, with the other organisms, other plants, and with the environment. It's so complicated subject actually, but we try our best to understand these relationships just like as an overview, right? So here we will study the relationships. What are the how, when, and why we have this kind of a relationship between organisms and the environment, and what factors govern these relationships. Right? What make these relationships important for animals? So these are the things that why we are going to learn ecology, right? On the other hand, the term ecology actually comes from this Greek term. Oikos is like a house or the surrounding environment, like surrounding. Whatever surrounding us is called the oikos in the Greek term, and logos is the wisdom, the knowledge, right? That's the knowledge around us, right? So now the many people got confused the term between ecology and the environment science or environmental studies, sometimes called ecology versus environmental science or the environmental studies. Now we have a separate department in our faculty, and maybe some of you follow some courses in the environment science or the environmental science, and how it different from ecology. That's something we need to differentiate. මොකක්ද වෙනස මේ ecology පරිසර environment science කියන එක අතර? In Sinhala terms, environment science පරිසර විද්‍යාව කියලා කියනවා. Ecology, that also in many people it's referred to as පරිසර විද්‍යාව, right? But it is not really the same, right? Even the Sinhala term, it's not parisara vidya. Environmental science is parisarika vidya. It's parisarika vidya. Ecology is parisara vidya. Its terms is little different the way we apply. So we will later we will discuss a little bit on this difference between ecology and environment science. But many people think that these are same, ecology and environment science, but it is not. Right? So let's see what difference there are between the ecology and environmentalism or the environmental science. Uh, right. As I mentioned before, there is some argument or the conflict between these two groups sometimes, or these terms used. And so the ecologists are actually the ecology is the scientific study to understand the how natural systems work. Right? So the basic uh, concept of ecologist or basic role of ecologist is to scientific study of uh, on the natural systems and how do they work. Right? It's always a scientific study, but when come to the environmentalist, right? So in environmentalists, they are usually a more ethical view. Right? How do you feel about the environment, right? So you understand this too, right? The ecologist is more scientific study, but environmentalists, how you look at the environment, right? And how we should interact with the environment. It's necessarily not, environmentalists necessarily need not to be a scientist always, right? So if you take the comparison here, the ecologists versus environmentalists, right? So you can see the some comparison. I mean, this is not a total comparison, but just to show how different each other. So is an ecologist an environmentalist? If you ask this question, if you raise this question, the ecologists are not always environmentalists, and vice versa. The environmentalists are not, most of the cases, environmentalists are not really ecologists, right? So as mentioned, the scientists, ecologists are always scientists, right? They working on the natural system work and the interaction between the organisms and with their environment. But on the other hand, the environmentalists are those who are interested in the environment, right? They can be scientists sometimes, but many cases they are not really scientists, but those who uh, like the environment, right? So they often have a lot of concerns about the environment, and many cases they are actually environmental activists, right? Parisara kriyakari, right? They always make some voice against some environmental um, damages, right? Of course, ecologists also do the voice, but the difference is the ecologist's role is always based on the science, scientific data, scientific backing. But the environmentalist role is most of the time is more emotional, right? Or ethical, right? Always considering the conservation point of view, right? So um, later you will understand the difference actually. Uh, if you are in a sort of a uh, NGO, maybe some of you already working on NGO on this as an environmentalist, right? So you always make some voice against some maybe cutting trees somewhere or cutting roads along a key habitat, maybe a forest. So anything like that, you usually make some voice against these things, right? But uh, ecologists are not always like that, but maybe sometimes, right? So ecology is always science, right? And that's what our focus here in this lecture series, the scientific background, right? And so the environmentalists may be with or without scientific backing, in many cases without, But now there is another term we call the conservation biology, right? You might have heard this term as well. The, the conservation biologists are actually, they are more a sort of a unifying, like putting both together, like ecology and environment. If you put both together, right? So scientists become environmentalists, and that term we use is the conservation biology, and more or less an integration of ecology and environmentalism, right? As I mentioned, that environmentalism can be some have interaction with the political and many things as well, but ecology is always independent based on scientific data, right? So let's take a little bit more into the ecology, right? So many people that think that ecology is just like giving a list of animals or plant somewhere in a maybe a forest or in a lake or only marine habitat, but it's not really that, right? It's more than that. Just giving a list is not really ecology, right? And we call ecology as sort of a multidisciplinary subject, right? So because the ecology involves a lot of background knowledge, you need to know a lot of background things if you are to be an ecologist. That is the thing. That's why I call it the multidisciplinary nature of this subject. Uh, if you can be a biologist who work on the ecology, but you need to know a lot of background information about the like a physical environment, a chemical environment, a little bit geology, geography, right? You might need a little bit of technology to do some research. You need to have some field exposure, right? You need to have technical knowledge, right? Collecting scientific data. And likewise, ecology is really a multidisciplinary subject. You will understand later on why we call it as multidisciplinary. That in know a lot of subject that we need to know about, like maybe even maths. Some in the ecology, you have a lot of some mathematical models. You have to have some the statistical data collections. Likewise, you need to have many background knowledge, right? Um, and on the other hand, the big problem that has many environment, many ecologists have is that it's so complicated subject, and like if you going to study a sort of interaction, you don't know where to start, right? If you ask someone to study the interaction in a pond, in a group of animal in a pond, you can't even imagine where to start because there are so many species, some even invisible species that can be there. There are some plants, animals, the surrounding environment, it change all the time. The temperature may be changed, right? The humidity may change, right? Amount of water change all the time. If we got rain, it will change, and likewise. So studying interaction within even a small pond going to be so complicated because it's always changing and the so many interactions, and you even won't be able to understand what kind of relationships are there. If only like if you see a prey and predator interact, then only you will understand that there is a relationship. But if there is no such, you won't be you won't be able to even understand what kind of relationships are there. So that's why it's this discipline called ecology is going to be really hard. So um, if any of you want to be an ecologist, I'm not telling it is impossible, but to be an ecologist a little bit difficult. Um, you need to have a lot of background knowledge, right? Um, the other thing is that the organisms are affected by the many factors, right? And not only that, by just existing, just being an animal in that environment, that also impact on the environment, right? So environment impact on the organisms, and on the other hand, their existence, just animal impact on the environment as well. So it's become even harder to understand the ecology because of this complicated thing, right? So, and that's why many say that to understand the ecology, you need to understand everything else, right? So that's why you need to have a lot of background information, particularly in the biological knowledge that you have with other uh, chemistry, physics, and then the other mathematics, the knowledge that you have already gained, as well as you might need to learn a lot of technological thing like do some mapping, some GIS work. Likewise, you have to do many things, right? So, as you can see from this slide, you have to learn a lot of things within the the environment if you really want to understand the environment, as well as if you have to be an ecologist, right? and and as I mentioned last week, in many cases the we know that ecologists more as observational scientists, right? Many ecologists are actually observational scientists, but not always. Used to be like something like, as I mentioned last week, like there are some very famous TV programs, uh, like many wildlife programs by uh, David Attenborough. You might have heard about this, the Blue Planet, the Animal Planet, uh, and the Human Planet. Like there are different series, and Life on Earth. There is Life on Earth was his first series where got a lot of popularity. You can watch these things. You can available in the YouTube, right? Life on Earth. And Marty Stauffer, you might have heard of the Wild America, very famous program sometimes back, but not anymore. Likewise, these videos actually, there are many videos from the the Geography channel. Likewise, they have more observational things, like you just use a video to observe animals, and you put nicely into a documentary type. They are observational, uh, and but if you go a little bit further, you can be more descriptive, right? If you just watch a video, it becomes more observational, and you can add a little more description about that animals, how they interact, what are their adaptation. Likewise, if you do it, that can be a little bit more descriptive, right? So that's how make this observational science into more descriptive science, right? Then that become ecology, right? Ecology is actually more descriptive in nature, right? So why do we learn ecology, right? As a science, that is the important topic that we have, right? If I ask this question from you, why do you learn ecology, right? I don't know, any of you have any idea? We definitely should have. Can anyone tell me why you learn ecology? Right? You can turn on your mic and then give me an answer. Why do you learn ecology? Anyone? You really need to be a little bit interactive, right? Even though this is online lectures, you can use we have better you maximum use the technology to interact uh, with me and your of course your colleagues. I would prefer if you can turn all the microphones and videos on. Unfortunately, that use a lot of bandwidth. Some of you might not have ability to access them. That's why we have to turn off the video. Otherwise, you should have done that one, right? So, anyone can add this one? Why do you learn ecology, or at least why you have some interest to learn ecology, or do you have anyone who is interested on ecology in that to be an ecologist in the future? Anyone? Right. So far, no idea. Okay. So it is actually to be an ecologist is going to be a really important career you'll be especially for a biologist. Right. I have added I think 2 videos from like undergraduate and postgraduate students. Why did they learn ecology, or what kind of a career they are expecting? Actually, the previous video was on that, and you better watch that videos later on, just after the lecture, and that gives some insight about why you learn ecology, right? There are many reasons why people learn ecology, right? It's basically to understand the nature, how natural systems work. But other than that, you can expand your knowledge of ecology into the many other things. Do your research, better understanding of the animals, their requirements, their interaction with the environment, and the environmental degradation, right? And especially the advise the governments or the authorities on what to do on some of the environmental issues, right? And what kind of a policies to be developed, right? And likewise, you can do many things if you are ecology, right? Um, right. That may also include the uh, some solving the environmental issues, right? Uh, and that and you can even advise the government sector, politicians, even if you are a ecologist, right? Like you might have seen like many scientists with ecological background, they advise the administrators on many aspects in their like when there is any environmental issues likewise, right? And why we learn ecology as a subject, uh, whatever the reason, but the some may have different motivation, right, to be a ecologist, right? But in reality, if you are to be an ecologist, actually this the motivation just to understand the nature, or just to like to be an environmental activist, or just to like works with the environment. Like some people really enjoy being environmentally, so at least working with the environment. So that motivation may be the first uh, thing someone to be ecologist. But what I'm telling here is that that motivation alone is not enough to be a ecologist, because it's always to be a ecologist a really really hard job. Um, so uh, and here um, the to be a ecologist you need to do many things, right? You need to be a very good observer, right? And and if you are really an ecologist, then we have to have a different lifestyle even, right? We usually ecologists, they have a different lifestyle, usually more conservation, like environmental conservation. They might, their lifestyle even will change if we are real to be ecologists, like they will have more concern on the environment. Always, if you are an ecologist, like if you take me as an example, like right, I don't want to post about myself, but like we have many habits of be a like environmental conservation parent, right? So that's why even in the first lecture I told you, never print this, even the lectures, right? Or the even your field assignment, or even your nature diary. Don't print them, just put them everything electronically, right? which will save a lot of trees, and never use plastic for any of your projects during your university or even after. Like usually we organize many national and international events, even aquatic science students or myself with our laboratory, we always going for like a single plastic free events, right? Almost all the event, like sometimes we have several days of workshops without using any single use plastics. You can use the glass bottles, right? Likewise, the refill water bottles. Likewise, you can avoid many things. Not to give any water bottles, rather refill bottles. Likewise, so if you are real to be want to be an ecologist, you have to have this environmental concern. And even if you go for a field work, you are not even allowed to touch an animal, because you are observational or you are an ecologist. You have to study the ecology as an ecologist, right? Not to damage them and not to harm the environment. You just observe them, and then you do your studies without harming the environment, right? So on the other hand, the ecologists are really, as you can see from the test, very purpose of scientists is not enthusiasm or interest, right? You just have enthusiasm or interest to be a ecologist or a scientist, it's not enough, right? Very important thing is you need to have um, some judgment, some argument, which need to be unbiased and impartial, right? Whatever your arguments you put forward, they have to be backed by science, data, statistics, right? Not based on your enthusiasm or your interest for the the, the environment, right? And and always you have to have an unbiased judgment on a particular topic, right? So I don't know whether you got the idea. Always your statements or whatever you mentioned, it has to be something back up by a scientific argument, right? So just because you have a passion for nature or a particular species in the one of particular animal species alone, it's not going to make you ecologist, right? But you need to have, right, uh, many other background information, right? And at the same time, you can be an ecologist. Okay, your professionally, you can be an ecologist in the future. You can be a environmentalist. Anybody can be an environmentalist actually if you have some enthusiasm. But you can be a professional ecologist if you really wanted to have a career in the ecology in the future, right? So again, I'll give myself as example. So I'm really a ecologist, right? Of course, I'm academic, but more than academic, I'm very much professionally. I'm engaged in ecological things, mainly actually the I can call as a marine ecologist, right? Not just the terrestrial ecologist, rather marine ecologist. I've put some images here just to show what kind of thing I'm doing as a marine ecologist, right? So, of course, I learned the biology, right? And then I do a lot of research on the ecological aspects in the marine environment, including these we do underwater ecological studies on coral reefs, seagrass beds, right? But more than that, I do a lot of work with the ports, like many of these actually studies on the Colombo port. Like we are working on the invasive species, invasive marine species, right? So very ecological studies, like we put some trays in the sea and see how the animals grow in these plates, like, and then they become like attached to these plates, and how they can be invasive, right? Because they are in the port environment. Any non-indigenous species that come from other areas can be established in our port. So we do long-term research on this and understand the ecological principles of invasive species for long period of time, right? So, and not only that, we have a lot of other collaboration with the foreign universities, uh, and not only that, like we do a lot of even some awareness programs, like not only the ecologists, we do some environmentalist role as well. Uh, as you can see, like some collaborative things, and we do research and some educational programs, as well as same time we put this whatever we learn, what the our understanding, we put into a like even the like more uh, writings as well, like as you can see here is the like some national events, national programs, national books, or anything that are related to like regulation, national laws and regulation. When we put in national rules and regulation, we really involve in these things. The experience we got from this kind of research and from the background, and we put them into the more like a national level, right? As you can see, is the sustainable vision. Actually, I wrote the chapter on the the marine sector. You might have heard about this. Called there are something called the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, global goals. In that, there are a separate goal. That's the life below water. Or the goal 14 is on the marine environment. So for the whole country, I wrote this chapter on the marine environment. Uh, how we can make ocean more sustainable, and how the ocean-based economy, how the as a country, how we can involve in this ocean-based economy, right? So that's where if you are an ecologist, you can do much more, even involved in the regional, local level, national level, or even regional level, right? So we have many publications even related to this deep ecological things like this, as well as some like some marine pollution related thing, as you have seen many work on the plastic pollution in particular. Likewise, so um, to become an ecologist, you can do many things. Of course, that need a lot of time, lot of experience, and a lot of work that you have done for a long period of time. For last maybe more than 20 years, I've been involved in the marine related ecological things. So with that experience, we can do many things, right? So what I want to highlight here that you, and at least some of you, can be really an ecologist in the future, because this country needs really ecologists. We have many environmentalists, but they don't have a scientific understanding, right? They just go against many things, but the ecologist's role is not like that. So we have to balance between the environment and the development, right? Without development, you can't have anything, right? Either you have to go back to the ancient time where you had like the Stone Age, or likewise you have to have a lifestyle like that, or either we have to cope with the environment. If you really want to go with this development without minimum damage to the environment, then you have to think differently, where we have to have the development projects as well. But the important thing is, whatever the development work, you have to consider the environment as well, right? So that's why you have to balance this um, environment versus development, right? We'll come to this thing later on, just for you to give some idea about why you should learn ecology. You can really be a career. You can have a career in ecology because there are many opportunities for environmentalists or ecologists to play a role. Maybe you can be a consultant, you can be a researcher, and you can do some involved in the EIAs, doing some environmental impact assessment. Likewise, many opportunities if you are to be an ecologist, right? Okay, then um, the definitions of ecology, I don't want to go into the details. There are many, couple of slides on this. This is just to show how the ecology can be defined, and that definition come from like different people have given different definitions for ecology. But for you, right, or for us, just what we need is just the ecology, the understanding of or the study of the scientific study of the interaction between the organisms and organism and environment. That's basic understanding enough. But these are just to see the history of how these terms has been evolved, and there are many definitions for ecology, but uh, simple understanding enough at this stage, right? And as you can see in this slide, even the Darwin, right? Darwin has talked about ecology. Of course, Darwin is not really a ecologist, right? But he is like an observational scientist, more observational things. But of course, he put a lot of concept based on his observations, right? He is rather a natural historian or evolutionary biologist, right? But in one of his statement, he talk about the one in green here, the mutual relationship all organic being to each other and to their physical conditions of life, right? So it clearly mentioned about the interaction between individual and the physical settings around them. That means the environment, right? So although not the term ecology, right, but he himself has mentioned about the similar term he has been using in the some of his writing, right? So it's very clear that he had this idea of ecology in his mind, right? Although the term ecology was not there by that time, right? So in the next slide, you see the jigsaw puzzle. I think you all might have seen this kind of a jigsaw puzzles, right? And here um, I want you to consider this ecology as sort of a jigsaw puzzle, right? In a jigsaw puzzle, you need all these pieces to make the picture, right? Right? If you want to have the big picture, you need to have all the pieces in that jigsaw puzzle put in a correct way. Right? Now, the ecology is something similar, right? If the ecology is like a jigsaw puzzle, but the problem in the ecology is that you might have all these pieces, but but in many cases not actually. In many cases, you don't have the all the pieces here, and then putting them together is going to be really hard, right? Because there are a lot of interaction between organisms, the environment, and other external factors. Likewise, you see here you can see many factors affecting the organisms. Uh, the many cases, the important pieces in the jigsaw puzzle is going to be missed, and that's the problem where we can't really visualize the ecological relationship in the environment. So it's so difficult to be or to be an ecologist in this context, right? But don't discourage if you really want to be an ecologist, and nothing going to stop you. If you really have a courage to be an ecologist, you can develop your background to be an ecologist, right? What you need is the term determination as well as the long-term working on that particular field, and definitely you can be an ecologist. And okay, let's go deep into ecology. And ecology can be divided in many different ways. There are many, as I mentioned in the very beginning, it's a multidisciplinary subject, and there are a lot of subdivisions in the ecology. You can divide the ecology into many different sections, right? It's just for our understanding, but the same ecology, whatever you learn, right? As you can see here, it's called the functional ecology versus evolutionary ecology, right? Some are like a functional, more physiological or behavioral, or likewise, or otherwise evolutionary ecology, right? There are many scientists like evolutionary ecologists. They learn about the evolution, right? The ecological background of evolution, how this giraffe got the long neck, right? Likewise, what different adaptation, likewise evolutionary ecologists. And the modern ecology also the historical ecology, like a paleo ecology, or the some long-term ecology, what the prehistoric ecology, right? Then there is another term called the autoecology, or the learning of a single species, versus ecology, or the like many species as a group. If you study a group of species, then you call this ecology. Then the pure ecology versus applied ecology. You know the term, the pure sciences. The pure science is just for your understanding. You do something. The pure sciences means you do something just for your understanding. But the applied science is more a little bit of applied aspects of like a little bit more into the conservation side, perhaps, right? Or if it is a host and parasite interaction, maybe, or the pest and pathogen like relationship, right? Some preservation of biodiversity, of preservation of genetic pool, likewise, who have applied approach, and then maybe it's called the conservation ecology or more restoration ecology, likewise. Right? They are more applied part of, otherwise it's become more pure ecology is pure understanding of the, just for your understanding if you do the ecology, right? And the list is not there where that then can be a descriptive ecology, like you have to describe a little bit more than what you observe, right? Not just the observational, right? And as you see, the lot of National Geographic videos are more observational than, but if you can add more description to that, and more then become descriptive ecology, right? Explanatory ecology, then a predictive, like you predict, you do a lot of predictions about the what would be in the future, how the environmental changes impact on the ecology, likewise more predictive things. That's where you need a lot of mathematical models, some concepts you have to use, right? Then the observational, as I mentioned before, it's more just it's called the natural history, scientific natural history. Then laboratory experiments to field experiments, right? And on the other hand, the behavioral ecology, population, community ecology, and landscape geological, like global ecology, likewise more. If you go down this different levels, you will have more better understanding about the ecology, right? But of course, going to be very complicated, right? So in the next slide, I have put some like just to understand the different scales of ecology, right? You in biology you usually learn about the cells, right, and the organs, right? The different organs and different systems, and then you have an individual, right? From cells to organs to systems, then you get an individual, right? So that is the basic biology we learn about the cell histology, the different organs and systems, how they function. And now the ecology starts actually as an individual, right? If you take the individual, so that's the beginning of ecology. You learn about individuals, how they interact, right? Like what kind of responses they have if the temperature change in the environment, how do they respond? If the temperature drops, how they respond? If temperature up, how they respond, right? And then other environmental phenomena, in this raining, so how the individuals, right, when there is a predator approach, then how they respond. Likewise, we can study about the individuals and how these individuals interact with the other individuals around, right? So if you learn just about individual, then we call this individual ecology, right? The ecology of individual organisms, what we call the organismal ecology, right? So that's the beginning of ecology actually. You just learn about the individual, because no matter the animals maybe or the plant even live in an environment with others, but in many cases they have to respond themselves. For many cases, like if predator comes, of course you can attack them as a group, but first instance you have to respond to that predator alone sometimes. So that's where the ecology begins as an individual. Then when put together individuals and we get the populations, then we got the population ecology, right? So individual ecology, then we put them together, then become the same species put together, then we become population ecology, right? If you take a couple of populations or several populations together, then you have the community ecology, and the communities and the surrounding environment we put together, that become landscape ecology or the ecosystem ecology. Then if we put everything together, it becomes biosphere. Likewise, this is how our understanding of the ecology will deepen with our understanding on different systems, right? From individual, from to populations, to ecosystems, to the communities, right? So that's what we are going to learn.
Natural ecosystems of the world. Ecosystem is one of the higher levels of organization of living world. We can consider ecosystem as the self-sustaining unit of biosphere. Let us learn about the different types.
Sorry about that.
Natural ecosystems of the world. Ecosystem is one of the higher levels of organization of living world. We can consider ecosystem as the self-sustaining unit of biosphere. Let us learn about the different types of natural ecosystems seen in the biosphere. Natural ecosystems are broadly classified into aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Let us consider the types of aquatic ecosystems. Aquatic systems are of two types. Lentic. This includes stagnant water ecosystems. You can easily recall a few examples. They are ponds, lakes, reservoirs, etc. Each of these is with its characteristic communities of organisms, plants rooted to the bottom and algae attached to the plants and to any other solid substrate are the producers. The consumers include tiny crustaceans, flatworms, insect larvae, snails, frogs, fish, and turtles, etc. Lotic systems. These are flowing aquatic ecosystems. Examples of these types of ecosystems are rivers, seas, and springs. The habitats available in rivers and streams differ in several ways from those in lakes and ponds. Because of the current, the water is usually more oxygenated. Photosynthetic plants play a minor role in the food chains here. A large fraction of the energy available for a consumer is brought from the land. Example, in falling leaves. Now, we will move on to terrestrial ecosystems. There are four major terrestrial ecosystems. Grassland ecosystem. Grasslands are comprised of a variety of herbaceous species, grasses with additional wildflowers and other shrubby and thorny plants suited to this open habitat dominate these areas. Generally, they remain devoid of trees because of frequent fire disturbance and heavy grazing. Dead and burnt plant remains and extensive root systems cause soils in the grasslands to have very high organic matter, rich in nutrients. The animals include grasshoppers, locusts, falcons, hawks, deer, cheetah, etc. Desert ecosystem. Deserts are usually seen between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. The desert gets heated up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit or 55 degrees Celsius during the day. During the night, the temperature drops to near freezing. The desert is characterized by its meager annual rainfall. One animal in the desert is the camel, which can stand considerable dehydration. Another animal is the horned toad. Some plants like cacti grow in the desert. Tundra ecosystem. The tundra is one of the major land ecosystems that is cold and gets ice covered. Here, the average temperature is -28 to 5 degrees Celsius. Common animals are polar bears, ducks, geese, sandpipers, weasels, ground squirrels, Arctic foxes, wolves, rabbits, and penguins. The tundra's common plants are dwarf willows, lichens, moss, grasses, and assorted flowers. Forest ecosystems. Forests may be tropical or temperate. The tropical rainforest is a unique environment. It is a home to more than 30 million species of animals and plants. Some of the animals that live in the rainforest are jaguars, keel-billed toucan, frogs, monkeys, and many other animals. Did you know that some of the trees in these forests could reach a height of 250 feet or more? Temperate forests have deciduous trees and seasonal variations. Forests are generally damp and moist.
Right. Of course, actually, this video intended for like a the school level, but that give a very good categorization of ecology, particularly the ecosystem. So that's why I use this video. I think you got some understanding about the types of ecosystems, like how we can classify them in different ways from the terrestrial versus aquatic ecosystems. Right? That I mean, of course, if you are an ecologist, you can be either terrestrial ecologist or aquatic ecologist, or you can be a plant ecologist. Likewise, no one can become just an ecologist. So that's why I put this as like you can be even aquatic ecologist, you can be a freshwater ecologist, or you can be a marine ecologist. Likewise, so my expertise is actually in marine ecology. Uh, so that uh, you have to understand that too, because you can't be just an ecologist, right? There is no such people called just ecologists. You can be a plant ecologist, marine ecologist, likewise freshwater ecologist, or even within that you can be like a subdivisions, right? So how are we going to learn ecology, right? We are still in a sort of introduction, right? This is how we're going to learn ecology in the next few weeks. As I mentioned before, we'll learn about the individuals or organismal ecology. Uh, uh, so I gave introduction about like why we learn about the individuals, because they are the one who has to respond to the environment at first instance. So we have to learn about the individuals. How do they interact with the environment? Then only we can understand the other form of ecology, that is the, the population ecology. That's where the within the same species, how we interact them as a population. How do they grow as a population? Like in the previous one, we learn how individuals grow, but in the second one, as a population, how do they grow? Like how do they breed and how they grow, how they interact, right? And the third one is the community ecology. Uh, Here we learn more than two species interact or in a community, and why do they interact? Why these different species interact with each other? How and why interact, and what kind of interactions are there? What benefits do they get? Right, that benefit can be sometimes negative, sometimes positive. Right. The next one is the ecosystem ecology. Right? Many communities why interact with between them as well as with the environment, and that's why particularly we talk about the more like the assemblages, like why different groups of individuals, why they together in an ecosystem, why do they interact with the environment in a same way, perhaps like for example in a coral reef. Right? So the last one is the landscape ecology. Right? This is how we're going to learn in the next few weeks, right? In the organismal ecology or individual, we learn about like what are the morphological adaptation in the individuals, so physiological adaptation, behavioral adaptation to uh, just exist as a individual in environment, right? So, and from there we will learn about the behavioral ecology. The right, then the other one is the population ecology, as I mentioned before. The how the size and composition of individuals change within the population, and how the population grows, and how and why they interact. Like for example, in this uh, right, this they like you see there is they always keep in some distance between individuals, more or less same distance in this case, right? So that is something prominent. We will learn these things. Why do they do that like that? Then from that to the population ecology to community ecology. In the community ecology, we learn about the like different types of interactions. For example, the competition, the predation, and prey-predator relationship, the mutualistic and the commensalism. Likewise, many interaction we discuss at the community level. Why do they have, and how and why they have these interaction? And from that to ecosystem ecology, I will talk about the nutrient recycling within ecosystem. All right, and the biotic component within a ecosystem. Likewise, we'll learn a little bit more detail. Right, so we'll take some examples like a coral reef. Right, how do they, like a different assemblage, different groups of animals, right? Some are reef builders, some destroy the reefs, right? Some some are predators, some are prey, like some really helpful in building a coral reef, whereas some damage the coral reef, but that those who damage the coral reefs are also important. They are the bioeroders. They put the recycling the system, right? So everybody in a system, they have a role actually. Some can be destructive in a population or in a community, in an ecosystem, but they also have a particular role to play, right? So these are the things that we're going to learn. From mangroves, like a different ecosystem, to this kind of a coastal rocky intertidal ecosystems. How do they, like, we will have a field class if possible. We'll try our best to have a, like in a tidal pool like this, to shoal marshes, to open ocean. Perhaps, I mean, we won't have a good field class on open ocean, but we will learn about these different types of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. How do they interact? And that's how we're going to learn ecology in next few weeks, right? All right, that's all about the today's lecture. If you have any questions or comments, you're most welcome. Right, and the next week we will continue our journey in ecology, but before that, I'll start with like a scientific method, because it's very important that you understand the concept of scientific method if you are to be an ecologist. So next week we'll start with this scientific method and what it is. Of course, you know this, but just to refresh your mind about the scientific method, and then we'll move on, right? Okay. So that's all for the day.